Hey everyone, welcome back. It's another week, so time for another video. Now for this week, instead of talking about the usual financial and money related topics, I want to look at things from a concept, pattern, and also psychology perspective, which can also explain why Russia's invasion was inevitable, it was going to happen sooner or later, and why withdrawing the troops is very unlikely. Also, this concept can translate into many other real-world problems, such as our housing problem that we're facing in Canada right now. Basically, this week we're going to take a quick look on explaining why people do things the way they do, and how we can use this concept to look into our own situation every day. Now, before we start, a quick reminder, if you haven't already, help us like the video and also subscribe to the channel. I love pumping out these videos every week to provide value. And the best way to help us is like our videos and subscribe to us because it really helps us with the YouTube algorithm. Alright, with that out of the way, without further ado, let's jump into this week's video. Now, the concept I want to talk about is path dependency. The best way to explain what path dependency is to talk about an urban legend or story that have been floating around for many years. Now, the story goes something like this. Have you ever looked at a space shuttle and look at the booster size and ask, how come the booster is the width that it is right now? Is it because it's scientifically better, it's more aerodynamic, it gives us a higher chance of successful launch? Well, according to the story, the answer is actually no. The width of the booster is the way it is because it's restricted by the train track width that they use to transport the booster. Because back then when they were creating these kind of booster, the factory is in Utah, and in order for them to transport and assemble the rocket at the launch site, they have to transport by train. That was the only way. And since train tracks are exactly 4 feet and 8.5 inches wide, the tunnels that they built so the train can go underneath and go through the tunnel are gonna be roughly to fit a train in that width. And because of that, the boosters are constrained to a certain width, or else it won't fit exactly into the tunnel. Then why are train tracks exactly 4 feet 8.5 inches wide? Because this is a very specific and exact number. Well, looking back, that's actually how the English built their railways in England. And because US railroads are built by the UK expats, they use the same standard over here. So looking one step further back, why did the English build their railway in England exactly 4 feet and 8.5 inches wide? Well, that's because the people that built the train tracks were also the same people that built the pre-railroad tramway system, and that's the width they used. So tracing another step back, why did the tramway build exactly this width then? Well, that's because they used the same tools they used to build wagons, and the spacing between wagon wheels were exactly the same width. So why is wagon wheel this specific width? Well, that's because they can't build any wider than this width. Because in the old times, the old English roads, especially for long distance, is exactly that wide. So if the wagon wheels were spaced any wider than this, the wheels are going to break and fall off very quickly. Now, you can probably see where this is going. We're taking one step back, further into the history. So who built the old English road, and why is it this exactly wide? It turns out it's actually the Imperial Rome that have built the first long-distance road in Europe for the Legion, and these roads have been used ever since. This brings us to the answer. Why did the Romans Legion build the road exactly this width? Well, the answer is they built it for the Roman chariot, and it has to be exactly this wide because they are pulled by 2 horses side by side. So drawing a direct link from rocket booster width all the way back to Roman chariots, we can pretty much say that the rocket booster width is constrained by the width of 2 horses' asses. Now keep in mind this is just an urban legend and there's some exaggerations in there to illustrate the point. For example, the rocket booster width is not really constrained by the train track width, it's more to be constrained by the load size of the train, and that's why it has to be this specific size. However, this is still a great story to illustrate what path dependency is. It is that people keep doing things the way they're doing it right now just because they have been doing the same thing in the past, even though the connection or the rationale no longer makes sense. But because they have started on this path initially, they're dependent on it. They have to keep going in this direction. Now, we can see path dependency in today's world everywhere. So for example, if you work in project management or you come up with a good solution, a great software that can solve a lot of the modern day problems, and you take it to your management and say, hey, look, I came up with this new solution. You may have heard things coming back to you and say, we can't use this because it's not conform to the usual standard of doing things, even though the usual standard is where all the inefficiency have been created. Now take Russia for example. Russia's path dependency to invade and annex neighboring territories pushes them to invade Ukraine and probably a lot more after that, even though maybe militarily or economically it makes no sense to do so. But because they have started on this path long ago, they will keep pursuing this path, which also will explain sometimes people ask, is Russia likely to withdraw troops? In my opinion, according to path dependency, the answer would be no. Because they have started the invasion already, they're more likely to double down than to change their direction. Now, moving over, we can also see the same thing with COVID nowadays. Right now, in the Western country, in North America, we're adopting the kind of coexistence with COVID. However, if you look over to the Asian countries, a lot of them are still right now trying to go for the zero case policy and going for lockdowns or restriction of entering the country. And this can be explained by path dependency. All the way back during SARS time, where North American countries have not been hit very hard, it's really the Asian countries that have to deal with it. What they did was a total shutdown of the economy and the cities. Now, it worked during those times because the spread was not very wide and it's also very deadly. So as soon as people got it, they just passed away. They didn't really have a chance to pass it to someone else. So lockdown made sense during those times and it worked. So using the same idea when COVID first started, they also went along that path, which again also worked because Alpha and even Delta was not as widespread as Omicron. But as soon as COVID mutated to Omicron, it was probably 3 to 5 times as widespread as the previous variants. Once that's happening, it's virtually impossible to have zero case policy. One person with Omicron takes a train ride around the city, you're probably going to infect 50, if not 100 people on the train. And those 100 people is going to further infect everyone around them. So instead, what's more logical is to switch over and try to coexist with the virus and encourage a higher vaccination rate. But according to path dependency, because a lot of these countries have started on a certain path already, they will stick to it, they will double down on it instead of making a switch in the policy. And finally, we can use path dependency and look at our current housing market and see how our government is set on a certain path and they're unwilling to change. Before, I'm talking about 15 years or even 20 years ago, it's okay with the lack of money laundering control, tight building regulations, lack of supply, home prices, even though they were growing, it was still controllable. But the recent 10 years, things have really started to get out of hand, especially the last 5 years. Even though the situation is getting out of hand, government is unwilling and unable to change because they have been set on a certain path many years ago. I know government have changed, the parties, but overall their way of treating big policies like housing have pretty much been the same. Because before, poor policy or lack of regulation that causes home prices to run wild is what got them elected. So it worked for them before. Right now, they will still rely on the same path, even though this housing problem is probably what's going to lose them the next election. Even though they know that, it's hard for them to change out of this already established path. They may say they have new policies, they may say they're making promises to build more homes, but in reality, if you really look at the actions they do, it's not keeping up with the promises that they made. And this can be explained by path dependency. Now, the scary thing about path dependency is it takes a lot of effort and probably a very catastrophic or dramatic event to happen before someone is willing to adopt a new path. The best example recently is looking at the Russia invasion. Before this invasion started, even US or other Western countries have said that it's not going to bring too much sanction to the Russia because that's the old way they have been treating these kind of Russia invasions. The West don't do much and they seem to be disorganized, weak, selfish when it comes to these kind of invasions. But because President Zelensky did not flee the country, instead he stayed to fight, and all the Ukrainians have put up a very fierce defense, this drastic change of event or expectation have pushed the West to unite together, sanction Russia, and also provide a lot of defense supply to the Ukrainians. So looking at this, it's actually very useful to keep this concept of path dependency in our mind when we look at our everyday things and what's surrounding us. We should keep this idea in mind all the time as we observe world events, because big drastic events are less likely to happen to change the path of someone or some country or some event. Path dependency can help us simplify our observation and our expectation of what is about to happen next. We can also use path dependency to examine our everyday life. Are we doing something because we're set on a certain path and we're unwilling to change even though the situation have changed already? For example, I see this sometimes in financial planning. Clients coming with a certain set belief personally, they have been on a certain path and they want to continue to move towards that path even though their current situation have changed already and the old path no longer serves them. On the other hand, if you're running a business right now, path dependency is also something you should pay attention to. Currently, the way you're running your business, everything about your business, are you still doing things the way you have been doing previously because it still works, it actually works, or you're just doing it because that's the old way of doing things when your rivals, your competitors, have been pushing out better products, better business model, better services already, but you're just unwilling to see the truth and unwilling to change your path. This is very important so that we don't become the Kodak of the camera industry and get replaced. Alright, so that's everything I want to share today. A quick, interesting topic or concept that can explain why the world is the way it is right now. If you like today's video, make sure you hit the like button once. If you don't like them, hit the dislike button twice. Next one I want to hear from you is what you think about today's topic. This is the first time I try something kind of different, go more on the economic or the psychology path. If you like these kind of concept or theories, let me know in the comment down below so I can do more in the future. Also, if you like my videos, I do upload them 8:30 EST every Tuesday. So make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, hit the bell button so you get all the notifications in the future. Alright, this is Jacky. I hope you found this interesting. I'll see you next week. Bye.